Okay, here we are for a lecture on Introduction to the Historical Books. We have to talk a little bit about the history of Israel in this. And so let's begin with the general history of the Old Testament, starting with Abraham. Abraham comes, of course, after the flood. Everything, all of this being written in the time of Moses. Moses is the first to write this down, or perhaps he has some documents, but as far as write it into the account that is the scriptural account, he is doing this in his time frame. But as far as history of the Old Testament, starting with Abraham, he starts over in the Ur of the Chaldees, over in Mesopotamia, and that's of course just north of Kuwait, over there in Iraq today. And this is the beginning of the history of the Israelite people. Really begins with Abraham, because Abraham is the one who's called out. Now, we know that God selected the line of Seth, Adam, of course, the line of Seth, Noah and his family, the line of Shem, through whom the blessing and the covenant would come, and then Abraham. And Abraham is called out. He and his father are called out. Terah dies, and then from Haran, Abraham is called out into the land of Israel. He is a wandering Aramean, Scripture says, so he's of the Aramean background from the Zagros Mountains over there in western Iran, eastern Iraq. So he and the Arameans filtered down, or the Shemites filtered down into the Tigris-Euphrates valleys, and Abraham is one of them. He was not a backward person. He's a pastoralist, but he's a wealthy man. He comes from Ur of the Chaldees, which is a city of 70,000. We're not talking about London hitting 50,000 people until around 1550, 80. So it was a large metropolis, a large city, a lot of comforts there. Huge. The Ziggurat temple was there. So religion, idol gods, religions were important, and even to Abraham apparently and his family, they were involved in some of this. Later, the putting away of idols, family idols, and things like this take place up in Haran with Jacob and Rachel taking her family idols. So in any case, there's some of this going on over in that area. Now, Abraham comes over into the land of Canaan, and he's not given any part of it. He's promised it, but he's not given any part of it but the cave at Machpelah, which he purchases for the burial of his wife and ultimately his burial as well. He spends some time in Egypt, sometime down near Gaza at Gerar, and at Beersheba. He's living down there. Makes friends of the Hittites. He makes friends of kings. Abraham is a sheik. He has 318 men who serve him that help him go retrieve Lot when Lot is taken captive by the kings of the east. And so he is a wealthy man. He's a wealthy pastoralist, and he is not a backwards person. He's in the presence of kings. He's speaking to kings in apparently multiple languages. So Abraham is an international personage. So he is not just a shepherd, that sort of thing. Israel is developed through, of course, Isaac and Jacob's sons. We start to expand the group of, Jacob is renamed Israel, Prince of God, and then Israel goes down into Egypt and spends a sojourn there of 400 years or so. So we have the Exodus taking place, and Israel comes out. And then, of course, the wanderings, which we've just talked about, and then they come into the land. And when they come into the land, there's all these other people groups around, the Midianites, the Edomites, the Amalekites, Transjordanian people groups. Early on, archaeologists said, well, these peoples weren't there in this time frame, but they were. Later archaeologists have found these people groups, or found evidence that there were peoples in these regions, and so they are there. The Judges period takes place. And then we have Saul becoming the first king of Israel around 1050, David in 1010, Solomon around 970, and the division of the land into a northern kingdom and southern kingdom around 930 BC. With the death of Solomon, he's led Israel into idolatry at the end of his life. And then we get Rehoboam in the south and Jeroboam in the north, and the other kings just followed. The southern kingdom of Judah has a Davidic dynasty at all times, though there is one queen mother who's a daughter of Ahab that rules for a short time, about 6-7 years. And then in the north, several dynasties. All of them are bad. All of them are apostate and worship idol gods and lead Israel to do such. The northern kingdom is taken out in 722. The southern kingdom becomes basically vassals to the Assyrians around the time of Ahaz in 738 or so BC. And then, again, the northern kingdom is taken out in 722 by the Assyrians. So the northern kingdom is just an Assyrian province from that time forward. And then basically for the next 100 years or so, Judah is a vassal of the Assyrians. Even though Hezekiah tries to throw off their yoke and seemingly does so, they're still really vassals to Assyria. And of course we have the worst king, Manasseh, Hezekiah's son, who then repents at the end of his life. And then we have the reforming king, Josiah, at the end, but he dies, and Israel is taken out of the land with the fall of Jerusalem and the Babylonian conquest and that sort of thing in 580. There's actually 3 deportations. 605, the first Babylonian deportation. 597 is the second Babylonian deportation. And 586 is the fall of Jerusalem and the rest. So in 605, Daniel and his friends are taken out. 597, we have the King Jehoiachin, is taken out and replaced by his uncle Zedekiah. So the leaders and the wealthy, they're taken out in 597, and basically the rest of anyone that's worth taking is taken out in 586, and the remnant, the poorest of the poor, stay in the land, and Jeremiah is one of them that stays. Ezekiel's taken out in 598, 97. So Daniel's taking out in 605, really prepares the way. By the time that the rest of Israel is coming, he's now in a position of leadership, can direct them to a good place to live and places to stay. So that's the basic. Let's see. So we have the exile period, which lasts about 70 years from the fall of the 586 of the temple. 70 years, it states in Daniel. And 516, we have the restoration of the second temple, the temple being built and restored, much smaller, of course. And then by 445 or so, we have Nehemiah and Ezra coming back, returning to Jerusalem and rebuilding the walls and reestablishing things. And then Malachi sometime within the next 100 years after that. And that thus ends the history of Israel as a nation. Now, we have an intertestamental period where Alexander comes through, and he dies, and his subordinates take over the known world at that time. And one of them, Seleucus, takes the Seleucid Empire up in Assyria and Iran, Iraq, that area, all the way over to Turkey. And one of his subordinates, Ptolemy, takes Egypt. And the Ptolemies controlled the nation of Judah, or the Judahite territory for a time. And then the Seleucids controlled it for a time. And then after Alexander's death, all this is taking place, and eventually the Hasmonean dynasty of Mattathias, the Maccabees, the Maccabean family, they come in and they set up a dynasty, and they stretch out and control most of the area of Israel and Judah until the Romans come in Pompey in 63 BC and others to follow. Herod is a local prince, son of Antipater, that his father was a great man, and dies and leaves to his 2 sons rulership, Phasael in the south, Herod in the north. Phasael dies, and then Herod runs to Rome and gets the chance. They give him rule of the kingdom of Judah. So that's how we get through the history from Abraham all the way to the New Testament. Now, in the ancient Near East, history starts with just chronologies or chronological statements, lists. This is the year of the king. His first year is the year of the king. The second year, this is an eponym list or a name list. So they name each year of the king. The year of the king and his name. The second year is the year of the king's vizier and his name. And then the third year is the year of the king's chief general and his name. So you give a name to everyone, and then they start annotating. In the year of the king's general, the crops were bad, there was a drought, and this enemy attacked in this area, that sort of thing. So they would start with annals, lists, and then they start to annotate and become annals. And that was one way that histories began, chronological histories. They also began with this idea of omens and omen texts. In the ancient Near East, the worldview was that whatever's happening here on earth is reflected by what's happening in heaven. If only we could spy up there in the sky with a telescope, we could see what the gods are doing. Remember, they believe in gods and a pantheon and idols and that sort of thing. But they believed that if they could figure out what's going on in the heavens, then we would understand what's going to happen here. So how did they do that? For some reason, they thought a mirror to the heavens was the liver of a sacrificial animal. So they would look at the liver of a sacrificial animal and they would say, hey, okay, we sacrificed today an animal, and the goat, and its liver had 2 lobes, where normally there was only 1. Okay, so it's got 2 lobes, and there's an extra vein off to the side. So they describe the liver as it is, and they write down what happened that day or that month. An enemy attacked the city. Well, then they make lists of this sort of thing, of events that took place and what the liver looked like. And then 10 years down the line, 15, 50 years down the line, they say, look at the sacrifice. It's got a liver with 2 lobes with a vessel or blood vessel going off to this direction. What did the list say? They go through the list. Guess what? Back in the day, when that liver showed up, that was a mirror to reflect what happens in the heavens. And guess what? An enemy attacked. So go tell the king that an enemy is about to attack. So they would make lists like this as well, and then annotate those lists, and then perhaps annotate, well, this is what happened. It actually took place, or this took place. So they're looking at their cosmology of how they viewed the heavens, how they viewed the world, and they're trying to put God in a box, or their gods, idol gods, in a box, and try to use sacrifices to figure out what's going on. And so this was their worldview as well, not just how they started histories, another way of starting a history, but they viewed the world through theocratic mindset. So history to them was one about that cyclical. It's going to come back around again. What happens now is going to come around again, and it has to do with the gods, and it has to do with appeasing them and finding out what they're going to be doing, and that sort of thing. So in their mindset, they had this pantheon of gods, just like Zeus in the Greek pantheon. It's Jupiter in Rome. It's Hadad in Lebanon. It's Marduk over in Babylon. It's the same pantheon, the same basic types of personages within the pantheon. It's just they have different names. So each city has their favorite patron name for the chief god, and that sort of thing. So for the Canaanites, and in the land of Canaan, it was El was the supreme god. His wife was Asherah, and he allows his son Baal to take over. Baal kills his brother and Mot, and becomes king. And in any case, eventually Baal takes over Asherah as his consort, and Baal also has a sister, Astarte, and so all of these idol gods are found in the Ugaritic texts. That's why we study Ugaritic, and they help us understand what it is that Ahab and the Baalism that's going on, and what the prophets are speaking against in the Book of Kings, and in the prophets themselves in their writings, when they talk about the types of things that are taking place. One of the epithets for Baal, he's the storm god, the bringer of rain. He's called rider of the clouds. Well, God is called rider of the clouds. It's not Baal who's actually the rider of the clouds that brings rain. It's God, Yahweh God himself, who brings it. So the prophets speak against these things and talk about how God is, and these idols really are not anything. So in any case, the cosmology then is that there's heavens, there's the land of the living that we experience, and then there's a netherworld underneath. And so this is how they viewed things. They also viewed that their pantheon of religious idols or gods, that it really reflects what they understood as city-state kingship at the time, a feudal kingship, where you have a king, and then you have the nobles under the king that the king gives land to, and they support the king in warfare and things. And then there are the craftsmen who work for the king and do special things and specific tasks. And then there are the messengers that just do what they're told. And so this structure or caste class system, or caste system, if you want to say, that's in a city-state, ancient Near Eastern city-state, is how they viewed those above them. The serfs or the normal people saw this class structure above them, and they viewed that the gods were doing the same thing. And so you see the gods on these different levels in their pantheon, the idol gods. So that's interesting. As you read, and as you read the text, you need to remember that the ancient Near Eastern peoples were thinking with this mindset. They're thinking that idol gods are important. They're thinking that gods are localized, that they are gods of their land, and that if another land defeats us, then their God is stronger. All sorts of things like this. It's presented in the text of Kings, where the king of Aram wants to fight against the northern kingdom of Israel, and they fight against them in the mountains, and they say, oh, well, are they in the plains? And they say, well, Israel's God is a God of the plains, so that's why we lost, so let's go fight them in the mountains. And then they say, well, they go to the mountains, and then they're defeated because they said that. God is not a God of just the mountains, not a God of a locale. He is the God of everything, a God of all and all creation. But this is the mindset that they had. And it's good to understand this, especially when you see the prophets and how they polemically talk against the ancient Near Eastern mindset and the idolatry that's going on. They speak against it in their texts, and it's very clear that they're speaking against it when you think about what they're saying. So sometimes you have God himself is stamping on in one text, he's stepping on the ocean and drying it up. He's stepping on the rivers, and he's stepping on the mountains, and all these, he's walking through creation, and he's wiping it out by his marching through. And the names of these terms that he's stepping on are terms for the names of idol gods. And so God is walking through the idol god pantheon of creation, and he's devastating it because he is the only God. In any case, very interesting to think through these things as you're reading. Next time we're going to talk about historical narrative and how to separate it out and how to analyze it.